The cold steel of a revolver pressed against Thomas Pierce's temple as sweat dripped down his brow. His hands trembled over the poker table where all his worldly possessions, including the deed to his land and his daughter's future, lay scattered among the playing cards. 17-year-old Tessa Pierce watched in horror from the shadows of the saloon staircase, clutching the banister as her entire world collapsed with the dealer's announcement. Full house beats 2 pair. It was 1876 in Silver Creek, Montana, a mining settlement that had sprouted like a weed between mountain ranges, attracting fortune seekers, gamblers, and desperados in equal measure. The winter had been merciless, leaving Thomas with nothing but debts and broken promises after his wife's passing the previous spring. "I've got nothing left," Thomas whispered, his voice cracking as he stared at the man across from him, Harold Jenkins, a local businessman with cold eyes and a reputation for collecting on debts by any means necessary. "Not quite nothing," Jenkins said, his gaze drifting toward the staircase where Tessa's shadow betrayed her presence. "Your daughter is of marrying age, and my associate here has been looking for a wife." He nodded toward a greasy-haired man with yellowed teeth who sat in the corner, smoking a cigar and leering at the young women serving drinks. "No," Thomas shouted, rising to his feet only to be shoved back down by Jenkins's bodyguard. "Not my daughter. Anything but that. You wagered everything you own, Pierce. A man's word is all he has out here. Your daughter will settle your debt nicely." Jenkins's voice was emotionless, as if discussing the price of grain rather than a young woman's life. Tessa's heart pounded as she crept back up the stairs, her mind racing. At 18, she had seen enough of the frontier to know what happened to women traded like cattle. Her mother had always told her to be strong, to fight for herself, but in this moment, she felt powerless against the machinery of men's dealings. 3 days later, Tessa stood in the dusty street outside the Silver Creek Hotel, a small bundle of personal belongings at her feet. Her father could not look her in the eye as Jenkins approached with the man who now claimed ownership of her, Edgar Simmons, a mine owner from the next county with a reputation for cruelty that preceded him like a foul odor. "You'll come with me now," Simmons said, reaching for her arm with fingers stained by tobacco. "I've paid good money for you, and you'll earn your keep." Before his fingers could close around her wrist, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew everyone's attention. A tall figure on horseback appeared at the end of the street, silhouetted against the setting sun. The rider moved with unhurried confidence, the kind born from years of facing danger without flinching. "That's far enough, Simmons," the newcomer called out, his voice carrying across the now silent street as he dismounted. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face partially obscured by the brim of his hat. As he stepped into the light, Tessa could see he was younger than she expected, perhaps 25, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a storm cloud. "This ain't your business, McAllister," Simmons spat, though Tessa noticed he had taken a step back. "I'm making it my business." The man McAllister approached with the easy gait of someone comfortable in his own skin. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze flicking briefly to Tessa before settling on Jenkins. "I understand there's a debt to be paid." Jenkins's eyes narrowed with interest. "The debt's been settled." "The girl belongs to Simmons now." "How much?" McAllister asked. "What? How much was the debt?" Jenkins named a sum that made Tessa's stomach sink. It was more money than her father had ever possessed, even in better times. Without hesitation, McAllister reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. "I'll pay triple," he said, tossing the pouch at Jenkins's feet. Gold coins spilled onto the dirt. Not for the girl, for her choice. A murmur ran through the small crowd that had gathered. Jenkins bent down to examine the coins, his expression calculating. Triple, you say? And what exactly does that mean, her choice? It means, McAllister said, turning to Tessa for the first time, that the lady decides what happens next. She can come with me, go with Simmons, or walk away free with no obligations to any man here. Tessa's breath caught in her throat as she looked into the stranger's eyes. There was something there, not pity but understanding, and something else she couldn't quite name. This is absurd, Simmons sputtered. A deal's a deal. You can't just— I believe I just did, McAllister interrupted. Unless you want to make something more of it. His hand hadn't moved toward his gun, but there was a stillness about him that suggested he would be very fast if it came to that. Jenkins studied McAllister for a long moment before scooping up the gold. Triple the debt is fair payment for breaking a contract, he decided, ignoring Simmons's protests. The girl's choice it is. All eyes turned to Tessa. She stood straighter, suddenly aware that for the first time in days, she held power over her own fate. She looked at Simmons with his greedy eyes and cruel smile. She looked at her father, broken and ashamed. Then she looked at McAllister, this stranger who had appeared like something out of the dime novels her mother used to read to her. "What's your name?" she asked him directly. "Adam," he replied. "Adam McAllister. And why would you help me, Mr. McAllister?" A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Let's just say I don't believe people should be traded like horses, Miss Pierce." Tessa nodded, considering her options. She could go with Simmons and save her father from further disgrace. She could walk away alone, trying to make a life as a single woman in a land that wasn't kind to those without protection. Or she could trust this stranger who had just spent a fortune to give her a choice. "I choose to go with Mr. McAllister," she announced, her voice steadier than she expected. Adam McAllister nodded once, then offered his arm. "My horse is this way, Miss Pierce." As they walked away from the stunned onlookers, Tessa whispered, "You realize I have nothing to repay you with." "I didn't ask for repayment," he replied, helping her onto his horse before mounting behind her. "All I ask is that you make your own decisions from here on out." As they rode away from Silver Creek, Tessa felt both terrified and strangely free. She had no idea who this man truly was or what awaited her, but for the first time in years, she was moving toward a future of her own choosing. Adam McAllister's ranch lay nestled in a verdant valley 15 miles outside of Silver Creek. As they crested the final hill, Tessa gasped at the sight below, a sprawling main house surrounded by well-kept barns, corrals filled with horses, and fields stretching toward distant mountains. A creek wound through the property like a silver ribbon in the late afternoon sun. "You own all this?" she asked, unable to keep the awe from her voice. "My father built it," Adam replied. "I've been expanding it since he passed 3 years ago." As they approached the main house, a wizened man with silver hair emerged onto the porch, rifle in hand. His weathered face relaxed when he recognized Adam, though his eyebrows rose at the sight of Tessa. "Samuel," Adam called out as he dismounted, "we have a guest. This is Miss Tessa Pierce. She'll be staying with us for a while." The old man Samuel gave Tessa an appraising look as Adam helped her down from the horse. "Proper guest or another one of your rescues, boss?" he asked dryly. Adam shot him a warning glance. "Miss Pierce is our honored guest. Please have Maria prepare the east bedroom." Samuel nodded and disappeared into the house, muttering something under his breath that Tessa couldn't quite catch. "Don't mind him," Adam said as he led her up the porch steps. "Samuel's been with my family since before I was born. He's more worried about propriety than I am." "And what about propriety, Mr. McAllister?" Tessa asked, suddenly very aware of her position alone at a strange man's ranch with no chaperone or protection beyond his word. What will people think of a young woman staying unchaperoned with a bachelor? Adam paused at the door, his expression serious. First, I have a housekeeper, Maria, who lives here with her husband, Roberto. You won't be unchaperoned. Second, what people think concerns me far less than doing what's right. He met her eyes directly. And third, Miss Pierce, I meant what I said about choice. If at any point you wish to leave, you are free to do so. I'll even provide transportation to wherever you want to go. Inside, the house was surprisingly refined for a frontier ranch. Polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books spoke of education and prosperity. A middle-aged Mexican woman emerged from what Tessa presumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Maria, this is Miss Pierce," Adam said. "She'll be staying with us for a time." Maria's dark eyes took in Tessa's travel-worn appearance and the small bundle of belongings she clutched. With a warmth that immediately set Tessa at ease, she smiled and said, "Welcome, Miss Pierce. I'll show you to your room and draw a bath. You must be exhausted." As Maria led her upstairs, Tessa caught snippets of a hushed conversation between Adam and Samuel in the foyer below. "Another stray, Adam. Your father would. Couldn't leave her there too. Talk is already spreading about." Their voices faded as Maria showed her into a lovely bedroom with a large four-poster bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the valley. For the first time since her father had lost that fateful poker game, Tessa felt the knot of tension in her chest begin to loosen. "Thank you," she said to Maria. "I don't know what Mr. McAllister told you about me, but he told me nothing except that you needed a place to stay," Maria interrupted gently. "And that is enough for me. The bath will be ready soon. After you've rested, perhaps you would like to join the family for dinner." Family. The word caught Tessa off guard. "Yes, I would like that very much," she managed. Left alone, Tessa set her bundle on the bed and moved to the window. The sun was beginning to set, painting the valley in gold and crimson. In the distance, she could see cowboys moving cattle toward a distant pasture. This was not at all what she had expected when she'd woken that morning, preparing to be handed over to a man who saw her as property. What kind of man was Adam McAllister, who would spend a fortune to free a stranger? And what did he truly expect in return? The bathwater was gloriously warm, scented with lavender that Maria had sprinkled into the copper tub. Tessa scrubbed away the dust of travel and the lingering fear of the past few days, allowing herself to simply exist in the moment. "Maria had laid out a simple but clean dress, one of my daughters," she explained. "Until we can see to your things," and Tessa gratefully changed into it before making her way downstairs. She found Adam in what appeared to be a study, poring over ledgers at a large oak desk. He stood immediately when she entered, and Tessa was struck again by how young he seemed for a man of such obvious means and authority. "Miss Pierce," he said, "I hope you found everything comfortable." "Very much so, thank you." She hesitated, then plunged ahead with the question that had been burning in her mind. "Mr. McAllister, I must ask, why did you do it? Why spend so much money on a stranger?" Adam gestured for her to take a seat in one of the leather chairs near the fireplace. As she sat, he remained standing, looking out the window at the deepening twilight. 3 years ago," he began slowly, "my sister was traveling back east to visit our mother's family. Her stagecoach was attacked by bandits. Most passengers were killed, but Emma, my sister, was taken." His voice tightened. "By the time I tracked them down, she had been sold to a man in Arizona territory, a man much like Simmons." Tessa's heart constricted. "I'm so sorry. Did you find her?" "Yes," he said simply, "but not in time. She took her own life the day before I arrived." He turned to face her, his expression haunted but determined. Since then, I've made it my business to interfere when I see the same happening to other women. It's not charity, Miss Pierce. It's penance." The raw honesty in his voice struck Tessa deeply. This was not a man looking for gratitude or servitude. This was a man trying to atone for something he could never truly fix. "I understand," she said softly. "And I am truly grateful, Mr. McAllister, but I can't simply live here as your guest indefinitely. I need to find a way to support myself, to build a life of my own." He nodded, seeming relieved at her practical response. "Of course. Silver Creek has a schoolhouse in need of a teacher. I noticed the books you brought with you, classics, philosophy. Are you educated, Miss Pierce?" "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father," Tessa explained. "She taught me everything she knew. I was planning to seek a teaching position before." She trailed off, unwilling to revisit the events that had led her here. "Then perhaps that's where we start," Adam said. "I'm on the town council. I can speak to them about the position. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need." Maria appeared in the doorway to announce dinner, and as they moved to the dining room, Tessa felt a curious lightness. For the first time in longer than she could remember, someone was seeing her not as a burden or an obligation, but as a person with value and potential. Dinner was a surprisingly lively affair. Samuel's gruff exterior concealed a sharp wit, and Maria and Roberto shared stories of their homeland in Mexico. Adam spoke of the ranch operations and his plans for expanding the herd. Tessa found herself laughing and contributing to the conversation, as if she had known these people for years rather than hours. As the evening drew to a close, Adam walked her to the base of the stairs that led to her bedroom. "Tomorrow I can show you around the ranch if you'd like," he offered. "And perhaps we can ride into Silver Creek to inquire about the teaching position." "I would like that very much," Tessa replied. She hesitated, then added, "Mr. McAllister, Adam, thank you again, not just for what you did today, but for treating me as a person worthy of respect." Something flashed in his eyes, pain, recognition, something more. "Everyone deserves that basic dignity, Miss Pierce, especially those who have had it denied to them." He bowed slightly. "Good night." As Tessa climbed the stairs to her bedroom, she realized that for the first time since her mother's death, she was looking forward to tomorrow. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the kind of spring day that promised warmth by noon. Tessa woke to sunlight streaming through curtains. She had been too tired to close the night before. For a moment, she lay disoriented, unused to the soft mattress and fine linens. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up, wondering if it had all been a dream. A knock at the door dispelled that notion. "Miss Pierce," Maria called, "breakfast is ready whenever you are, and Mr. McAllister asked me to tell you he'll be back from the north pasture mid-morning if you still wish to go into town." "Thank you, Maria." "I'll be down shortly," Tessa called back, already rising to wash and dress. The borrowed dress from the night before had been laundered and pressed, hanging on a hook near the washstand alongside her own modest garments, which had also been cleaned. Downstairs, she found a breakfast spread that would have fed her and her father for days: fresh bread, eggs, smoked ham, and preserves. Samuel sat at the table, reading a newspaper while drinking coffee. "Morning, Miss Pierce," he said, folding the paper. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," she admitted, helping herself to some bread and preserves. "Is it always this quiet in the mornings?" Samuel chuckled. "Adam's usually up before dawn, checking on something or other. Man works harder than any two hired hands put together." "Been that way since his father died, but worse since we lost Emma." "He told me about his sister," Tessa said quietly. "It must have been devastating for all of you." Samuel's weathered face softened. "Emma was the light of this place, After she was gone, Adam threw himself into the ranch and his projects. He gave Tessa a significant look. You're not the first person he's helped, though you might be the prettiest. Tessa felt her cheeks warm. He mentioned a teaching position in town. Ah, yes. Old Miss Winters finally retired after 30 years of terrorizing the children of Silver Creek. Town's been looking for someone educated enough to take over. You interested in the position? Very much so, Tessa replied. Teaching was always my ambition. Samuel nodded approvingly. Good. Adam could use someone with ambition around here. Too many people just looking for handouts or rescue. Before Tessa could respond to that loaded statement, the sound of hoofbeats approached the house. Through the window, she saw Adam dismounting from a magnificent black stallion, speaking with one of the ranch hands before turning toward the house. He entered moments later, removing his hat as he stepped inside. "Good morning," he said, his eyes finding Tessa immediately. "I see Samuel's been keeping you company." Telling her about the teaching position, Samuel confirmed, rising from the table. "I'll be in the study if you need me. Those cattle contracts won't review themselves." After Samuel left, Adam poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from Tessa. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his manner slightly awkward, as if unused to making small talk with a woman at his breakfast table. "Very well, thank you," she replied. "Your home is beautiful." "It's too big for just me," he said, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, it was built for a family. My father always expected a house full of children and grandchildren." Tessa sipped her tea to hide her smile at his discomfort. For a man so confident when facing down the likes of Simmons and Jenkins, Adam McAllister seemed charmingly out of his depth in casual conversation. "Samuel mentioned you help others," she said, changing the subject. "People like me, I mean." Adam's expression grew more serious. "When I can. Usually it's arranging safe passage for women trying to escape bad situations, sometimes finding work for people down on their luck." He shrugged. "Silver Creek isn't the worst town in Montana, but it has its share of predators." "Like my father's creditors," Tessa said softly. Adam studied her for a moment. "May I ask about your father? You don't speak of him with hatred, despite what happened." Tessa sighed, setting down her cup. "My father wasn't always as you saw him. When my mother was alive, he was different, responsible, hardworking. Her death broke something in him. The drinking, the gambling, they were his way of escaping his grief, I suppose." She looked up at Adam. "I don't hate him, I pity him. And I worry about what will become of him now." "I made inquiries," Adam said carefully. "He left town yesterday, headed for the gold fields near Helena. Jenkins gave him enough money for a fresh start, part of our arrangement." Tessa was stunned. "You did that for him, after what he did?" Adam's expression was unreadable. "I did it for you, so you wouldn't have to worry about him while you build your own life." The simplicity and thoughtfulness of the gesture left Tessa momentarily speechless. "Thank you," she finally managed. "That means more than I can express." Adam nodded, seeming embarrassed by her gratitude. "If you're ready, we can ride into town now. The school board meets at the church on Tuesdays. We should be able to catch them." As they rode toward Silver Creek, Tessa, on a gentle mare named Daisy that Adam assured her was perfect for an inexperienced rider, she couldn't help but notice how people nodded respectfully to Adam as they passed. It was clear he commanded substantial respect in the area. The town looked different in daylight than it had during her terrifying ordeal. Tessa could see now that Silver Creek was trying to establish itself as something more than just a mining camp. There was a proper general store, a milliner's shop, a bank, and even a small lending library attached to the church. Children played in the streets while women hung laundry and men went about their business. They dismounted in front of the white clapboard church, and Adam tied their horses to the hitching post. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. Tessa took a deep breath and nodded, placing her hand on his arm. The touch sent an unexpected warmth through her, which she quickly dismissed as nerves about the interview ahead. Inside the church, 5 people, 3 men and 2 women, sat in a semicircle, apparently just concluding some other business. They looked up as Adam and Tessa entered, curiosity evident on their faces. "Mr. McAllister," said a distinguished-looking older man with a silver beard, "we weren't expecting you today." "Judge Holloway," Adam greeted him. "I've brought someone I believe might be of interest to the school board. May I present Miss Tessa Pierce? She's the daughter of a schoolteacher and has expressed interest in the position at our schoolhouse." Judge Holloway's eyebrows rose slightly as he studied Tessa. "Pierce? Any relation to Thomas Pierce?" Tessa straightened her shoulders. "He's my father, sir, but I hope you'll judge me on my own merits." A woman in a severe black dress spoke up. "We're all aware of what happened with your father, Miss Pierce. It's the talk of the town. And now you're staying at Mr. McAllister's ranch." Her tone made it clear what conclusions the town had drawn. Tessa felt her cheeks burning, but before she could respond, Adam stepped forward. "Mrs. Blackwood, I would remind you that gossip is beneath the dignity of this board. Miss Pierce is my guest, staying with my housekeeper as chaperone, and her personal circumstances have no bearing on her qualifications to teach." Judge Holloway cleared his throat. "Adam is right, Margaret. We should hear the young lady out." He turned to Tessa. "Miss Pierce, what qualifications do you have for teaching our children?" For the next half hour, Tessa answered questions about her education, her knowledge of various subjects, and her teaching philosophy. With each answer, she grew more confident, remembering her mother's passion for education and feeling it ignite within herself. "And how do you propose to maintain discipline in a classroom with children of all ages?" asked the third man, who had introduced himself as the town doctor. "My mother always said that children rise to the expectations set for them," Tessa replied. "I believe in clear rules, consistently enforced with fairness, but more importantly, I believe in engaging children's natural curiosity so thoroughly that discipline becomes secondary to learning." By the end of the interview, even Mrs. Blackwood seemed grudgingly impressed. Judge Holloway conferred briefly with the other board members before turning back to Tessa. "Miss Pierce, we've had several applicants for the position, but I must say, your passion and knowledge are exceptional. The board will need to deliberate, but I believe I speak for most of us when I say you are a strong candidate. We'll have our decision by week's end." As they left the church, Tessa couldn't contain her excitement. "Do you think they'll really consider me despite?" She gestured vaguely, encompassing her situation. "Judge Holloway is fair," Adam said, helping her onto Daisy. "And the town desperately needs a teacher. I think your chances are excellent." They spent the rest of the day exploring Silver Creek. Adam showed her the schoolhouse, a modest building with rows of desks, and a small living quarters attached for the teacher. They visited the general store where Tessa selected fabric for new dresses that Maria had offered to help her sew. And they had lunch at the hotel's restaurant, where Adam was treated with deference by the staff. As they ate, Tessa noticed a group of men at a nearby table watching them and whispering. Adam seemed to notice too, his jaw tightening slightly. "Is everything all right?" she asked quietly. "Just the town gossips," he replied, keeping his voice low. "My reputation makes me an object of speculation, and now you've been added to the mix." "Your reputation?" Tessa asked, curious. "Samuel mentioned projects and you spoke of helping others. Is there more to it than that?" Adam hesitated, then seemed to decide on honesty. "After Emma died, I made some enemies tracking down the men responsible for her abduction. I didn't kill them, he added quickly, seeing her expression, but I made sure they faced justice. Since then, I've developed a reputation for interfering when I see women being mistreated. Some men in these parts don't appreciate that. Like Jenkins and Simmons, Tessa said, understanding dawning. Exactly. Jenkins will leave town soon, he always does after he's accumulated enough money. But Simmons has roots here, and he's not the type to forget a humiliation. The warning in his voice was clear. You think he might cause trouble? For you, I mean. Adam shrugged, trying to appear unconcerned. Nothing I can't handle, but it's something to be aware of while you're in town. As they rode back to the ranch that afternoon, Tessa found herself watching Adam more closely. There was a depth to him. She was only beginning to understand a complexity born of grief, guilt, and an unwavering moral compass. He was not simply the heroic figure who had rescued her. He was a man shaped by loss and determined to prevent others from suffering as he had. And as the days turned into weeks, that understanding only deepened. The school board offered Tessa the teaching position 3 days after her interview. She accepted immediately, though Adam insisted she continue staying at the ranch until the teachers' quarters could be properly prepared. The roof leaks, he explained, and there's no proper furniture. Give me 2 weeks to make it habitable. Those 2 weeks stretched into a month as spring rains delayed repairs, and Tessa found herself settling into life at McAllister Ranch with surprising ease. She spent her mornings helping Maria in the kitchen or garden, her afternoons planning lessons for the upcoming school term, and her evenings in the study with Adam, discussing books, politics, or the day's events on the ranch. It was during these evening conversations that Tessa began to see the man behind the legend that Silver Creek had created. Adam was well-read, thoughtful, and possessed of a dry humor that emerged when he was truly comfortable. He spoke of his travels, his dreams for the ranch, and occasionally, when the hour grew late and the fire burned low, of his sister Emma and the guilt he still carried over her fate. I should have gone with her, he confessed one such night, staring into the flames. Or insisted she take more guards. I knew the dangers, but I let her convince me she would be fine. You couldn't have known what would happen, Tessa said gently, and from what you've told me of Emma, she was as stubborn as you are. That drew a small smile from him. She was. Father always said we got double doses of McAllister hard-hittedness. His expression grew wistful. You would have liked her, I think, and she would have adored you. The personal nature of the comment hung in the air between them, unacknowledged but impossible to miss. Tessa found herself wondering when exactly their relationship had shifted from rescuer and rescued to. Whatever this was becoming. As the day approached for Tessa to move into the teachers' quarters, she found herself increasingly reluctant to leave the ranch. She had grown fond not only of Adam, but of the entire household, Samuel's gruff affection, Maria and Roberto's warm inclusion of her in their family rituals, even the ranch hands who tipped their hats respectfully when she passed. And then, there was the growing tension between her and Adam, a tension made of lingering glances, accidental touches that lasted a moment too long, and conversations that seemed to hold deeper meanings beneath the surface. 2 days before she was set to move to town, Adam suggested a ride to show her his favorite spot on the property. They rode for nearly an hour, climbing a gentle slope until they reached a bluff overlooking the entire valley. The view was breathtaking, the ranch spread out below them, the town of Silver Creek visible in the distance, and mountains rising majestically beyond. I come here to think, Adam said as they dismounted. To remember why I stay, when it would be easier sometimes to sell everything and start fresh somewhere else. It's beautiful, Tessa said, standing at the edge of the bluff. I can see why you love it. Adam moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Tessa," he said, her name sounding different somehow in his voice. "These past weeks, having you at the ranch." He trailed off, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. Tessa turned to face him, her heart suddenly racing. "Yes, I find myself dreading your departure," he admitted. "The house will seem empty without you." She swallowed hard, gathering her courage. "It doesn't have to be empty, Adam. I could visit, often. Or you could stay," he said quietly. "Not as a guest. As—" He took a deep breath. "Tessa, I know it's too soon, and you've barely had a chance to establish your independence after everything that happened. The last thing I want is for you to feel obligated or pressured. But I find myself falling in the crack of a rifle shot cut through the air, and Adam's hat went flying. In an instant, he had pulled Tessa to the ground, covering her body with his own as another shot splintered the tree beside them. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his revolver and scanning the tree line below the bluff. A third shot kicked up dirt inches from their position. "Who is it?" Tessa gasped, her heart pounding with fear. "I have a good guess," Adam muttered. "Can you make it to the horses if I provide covering fire?" Tessa nodded, though her entire body was trembling. "On my count," Adam said. 1, 2, 3. He fired 3 rapid shots toward the trees where the gunman was hiding, and Tessa scrambled to her feet, running in a crouch toward the horses. She reached Daisy just as Adam fired twice more, then back toward his own mount. They rode hard down the other side of the bluff, taking a circuitous route back to the ranch. Adam kept them in the trees as much as possible, constantly scanning for pursuit, his expression grim. When they finally reached the ranch, Adam immediately called for Samuel and 2 of his most trusted hands. "Simmons," he explained tersely. "Had to be. This wasn't random." While Adam organized a search party, Maria led a shaken Tessa inside and pressed a cup of strong tea into her hands. "Are you hurt, Mija?" she asked, examining Tessa for injuries. "No, just frightened," Tessa replied. "Adam protected me. She broke off, realizing suddenly that Adam had been about to declare his feelings when the shooting started. The memory sent a flood of warmth through her despite the lingering fear. Adam and the men returned after dark, tired and grim-faced. "No sign of him," Adam reported, accepting the coffee Maria offered. "But we found where he'd been waiting. He'd been there a while, watching the ranch. He knew that spot was one of my regular rides." "This is because of me," Tessa said miserably. "Because you interfered with Simmons's plans for me." "No," Adam said firmly. "This is because Simmons is a man who believes he can own people, and I've challenged that belief. It's not your fault." Later that night, unable to sleep, Tessa made her way downstairs for a glass of water. She found Adam still awake, sitting at the kitchen table cleaning his revolver by lamplight. "You should be resting," he said when he saw her, though his tone was gentle. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, sitting across from him. "Adam, about what you were saying before the shooting." His hands stilled on the gun. "Now isn't the time, Tessa. You've had a frightening day, and I shouldn't have spoken so soon. You deserve time to build your own life, not be pulled into my complications." "Shouldn't that be my choice?" she asked, echoing the words he'd used that first day in Silver Creek. "You paid triple a gambling debt to give me a choice. Will you now take that choice away because you're afraid?" Adam's eyes met hers, surprise evident in his expression. "I'm not afraid for myself," he said quietly. "I'm afraid for you. My life isn't simple. Today made that clear." "Life is never simple," Tessa replied. "My mother used to say that the only things worth having are the things worth fighting for." She reached across the table and laid her hand over his. "I was listening before we were interrupted, Adam, and I'd like to hear the rest." For a moment, he seemed frozen, staring at their joined hands. Then he set the gun aside and turned his palm up to clasp her fingers. "I was going to say," he continued as if there had been no interruption, "that I find myself falling in love with you, Tessa Pierce. Not because I rescued you, or because you needed me, but because of who you are, your strength, your kindness, your determination to build something from the ashes of what happened to you." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not asking for anything right now. I just wanted you to know before you left for town." Tessa felt tears pricking at her eyes, but they were tears of a different sort than the ones she'd shed so often in recent months. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me, because I've seen how quickly security can vanish. But it also gives me hope, because for the first time, I feel like I'm choosing my path rather than having it chosen for me." Adam stood, still holding her hand, and drew her to her feet. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so gentle it made her heart ache. Tessa responded, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat accelerate beneath her palm. When they broke apart, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "We'll take this slowly," he promised. "You'll still take the teaching position, establish yourself in the community, and I'll court you properly if you'll allow it." Tessa smiled, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with fear or gratitude and everything to do with the man before her. "I think I'd like that very much, Mr. McAllister." The next morning brought news that Edgar Simmons had been seen boarding a stage headed east, apparently deciding that pursuing his vendetta against Adam wasn't worth the risk. "He knows I won't let this go," Adam explained as they sat at breakfast. "And he has enough enemies that he can't afford to make more powerful ones." Relief washed over Tessa, though a small part of her wondered if this was truly the end of the matter. Men like Simmons didn't seem the type to surrender so easily. "Does this change your plans for today?" Samuel asked, looking pointedly between Adam and Tessa. The old foreman had entered the kitchen just in time to witness their kiss the night before, and though he had diplomatically retreated without comment, his knowing expression this morning made it clear he had seen enough. Adam glanced at Tessa, a question in his eyes. "That depends on Miss Pierce," he said. "We were planning to move her things to the teacher's quarters today." Tessa considered her options. Part of her wanted to stay at the ranch, to remain in the safety of Adam's protection and the comfort of his growing affection. But another part, the part her mother had nurtured with stories of independent women forging their own paths, knew that she needed to establish herself on her own terms. "I think we should proceed as planned," she decided. "The children will be expecting their new teacher to be settled before classes begin next week." Adam nodded, a mix of disappointment and pride in his expression. "Then we'll head to town after breakfast." The teachers' quarters had been transformed in the month since Tessa had first seen them. The leaking roof had been repaired, the floors sanded and polished, and new furniture including a comfortable bed, a writing desk, and bookshelves filled with volumes from Adam's own library had been installed. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, and a vase of wildflowers sat on the small dining table. "It's perfect," Tessa breathed as she walked through the two-room apartment attached to the schoolhouse. "Adam, you've thought of everything," he shrugged, looking pleased but embarrassed by her praise. "I wanted you to be comfortable," and Maria insisted on the curtains and linens. As they unpacked her few belongings, Tessa noticed a small wooden box on the desk that hadn't been there when they first arrived. "What's this?" she asked, lifting the lid to find a brass key inside. "A housewarming gift," Adam said, moving to stand beside her. "It's a key to the front door of the ranch house, so you know you always have a place there whenever you want it." Tessa turned to him, deeply touched by the gesture. "Thank you," she said, standing on tiptoe to kiss his cheek. "For everything." Adam caught her hand as she began to pull away, his expression serious. "Tessa, I meant what I said last night. I want to court you properly. May I call on you tomorrow evening? Perhaps take you to dinner at the hotel?" The formality of the request made her smile. "Yes, Adam. I would like that very much." He nodded, seeming relieved. "Then I'll leave you to settle in. But if you need anything at all, send word to the ranch. I can be here in 20 minutes. After he left, Tessa sat on her new bed, running her fingers over the key he had given her. It represented more than just access to his home. It was a promise of something deeper, a future where she had both independence and connection. The next morning, Tessa awoke to the sound of children's voices outside the schoolhouse. Peering through the curtains, she saw a group of boys and girls playing in the schoolyard, supervised by what appeared to be an older sister or young mother. Excitement mingled with nervousness as she realized that in just a few days, these children would be her responsibility. She dressed carefully in one of her new dresses, a modest blue calico that Maria had helped her sew, and ventured outside to introduce herself. The woman supervising turned out to be Jenny Holloway, the judge's daughter-in-law, who had brought her own children and some neighbors to play. "We're all so excited to have a new teacher," Jenny said warmly after introductions were made. Miss Winters was knowledgeable but rather severe. The children were more afraid of her than inspired by her. "I hope to change that," Tessa said, smiling at a little girl who was peering shyly at her from behind Jenny's skirts. "I believe learning should be joyful as well as rigorous." Jenny's expression turned knowing. "We've heard a lot about you, Miss Pierce. About how you came to Silver Creek and about Adam McAllister's involvement." Before Tessa could respond, she continued, "Don't worry, I don't put much stock in gossip. Judge Holloway thinks very highly of you, and that's good enough for me. And anyone Adam vouches for must be special indeed." "You know Adam well?" Tessa asked, curious about this friendly woman who seemed to accept her so readily. "My husband Thomas grew up with him," Jenny explained. "They've been friends since boyhood, though Thomas is a lawyer now rather than a rancher. Adam is godfather to our oldest son." She glanced at Tessa appraisingly. "He's a good man, Miss Pierce, the best I know, in fact, and I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you since, well, ever." Before Tessa could formulate a response to this frank assessment, the children called for Jenny's attention, and the moment passed. But as she helped gather the children for their return home, Tessa found herself smiling at the knowledge that Adam had friends in town who thought so highly of him, and who seemed willing to extend that goodwill to her. That evening, as promised, Adam arrived at her door precisely at 6 o'clock, looking unusually formal in a dark suit and crisp white shirt. He had even trimmed his beard and slicked back his usually unruly hair. "You look beautiful," he said when she opened the door, his eyes taking in her best dress, a deep green that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. "You clean up rather nicely yourself, Mr. McAllister," she replied with a smile, accepting his offered arm. As they walked toward the hotel, Tessa was acutely aware of the eyes following them, curious townspeople, watching this public declaration of Adam's intentions toward the new schoolteacher. She held her head high, remembering that she had nothing to be ashamed of, that her position had been earned on merit rather than charity. Dinner was a surprisingly elegant affair for a frontier town hotel. Adam had reserved a private table near the window, and the hotel owner himself served them, making recommendations for the best dishes and bringing a bottle of wine that Adam assured her was actually drinkable, unlike most of what passes for wine in Silver Creek. They talked easily, picking up threads of conversations begun during their evenings in his study discussions of books they both enjoyed. Adam's plans for expanding the ranch's horse breeding program, and Tessa's ideas for the school curriculum. It felt natural, as if they had known each other for years rather than weeks. As they were finishing dessert, a surprisingly good apple pie the hotel door burst open, and a commotion drew their attention. 3 rough-looking men had entered, clearly already intoxicated despite the early hour. One of them spotted Adam and nudged his companions, pointing and speaking too loudly. "That's him, McAllister, the one Simmons was talking about." Adam's expression darkened, but he turned back to Tessa. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "They're just looking for attention." But the men weren't content to be ignored. They approached the table, the leader a tall man with a scraggly beard and missing front tooth, leaning down to leer at Tessa. "So this is the fancy piece Simmons was supposed to get," he slurred. "No wonder McAllister wanted her for himself. Pretty little thing." Adam was on his feet instantly, his hand moving toward his gun before he visibly checked himself. "You're drunk, Peterson," he said evenly. "Take your friends and leave before this becomes something you'll regret." Peterson laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "Big talk from a man dining with damaged goods. Everyone knows you bought her from her daddy's gambling debts." The words cut through Tessa like a knife, but before she could respond, Adam's fist connected with Peterson's jaw, sending him sprawling into his companions. The entire restaurant went silent. "Get out," Adam said, his voice deadly quiet. "And if I ever hear you speak about Miss Pierce again or any woman in that manner, a bloody nose will be the least of your concerns." The hotel owner and several other patrons had risen to their feet, clearly ready to back Adam if the situation escalated. Peterson, realizing he was outnumbered and outmatched, scrambled to his feet with as much dignity as he could muster. "This ain't over, McAllister," he muttered, but he allowed his friends to drag him toward the door. After they left, Adam turned to Tessa, his expression a mix of anger and concern. "I'm sorry about that," he said, taking his seat again. "Peterson works for the Diamond Bar, one of Simmons's properties." "It's all right," Tessa said, though her hands were trembling slightly in her lap. "What he said. It's what many people are thinking, isn't it? That I'm somehow your property now instead of Simmons's." Adam reached across the table to take her hand. "What people think doesn't matter. You and I know the truth that you're here of your own free will, building your own life. The rest is just noise." His words comforted her, but as they walked back to her quarters after dinner, Tessa couldn't help wondering if Silver Creek would ever truly accept her, or if she would always be defined by the circumstances of her arrival. At her door, Adam took both her hands in his. "Don't let what happened tonight trouble you too much," he said, seeming to read her thoughts. "People will talk until something more interesting comes along. By the time you've been teaching a month, they'll have moved on to fresher gossip." Tessa nodded, wanting to believe him. "I hope you're right." "I usually am," he said with a small smile, then grew serious again. "Tessa, may I kiss you goodnight?" The formal request, so at odds with the man who had knocked Peterson to the floor without hesitation, made her heart swell with affection. "Yes, Adam, you may." This kiss was different from their first, still gentle, but with an undercurrent of something deeper, a promise of feelings that were growing stronger with each passing day. When they broke apart, Adam brushed a strand of hair from her face with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "Good night, Tessa," he said softly. "I'll see you tomorrow." She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the gas lamps of Silver Creek's Main Street, and felt a certainty settling in her heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The first day of school arrived bright and clear, with 27 children ranging in age from 6 to 16 filing into the freshly cleaned schoolroom. Tessa stood at the front, heart pounding but chin high, as she introduced herself to her new pupils. "Good morning," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm Miss Pierce, your new teacher. I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you and learning together this year." The children regarded her with varying degrees of interest, suspicion, and curiosity. A small boy in the front row raised his hand immediately. "Yes," Tessa acknowledged him. "Are you really Mr. McAllister's sweetheart?" he asked bluntly, causing several of the older children to giggle and one girl to elbow him sharply in the ribs. Tessa felt her cheeks warm but kept her composure. "My personal life is not a topic for the classroom," she said firmly. "Now, let's begin by learning all of your names and then we'll talk about what we'll be studying this term." By lunchtime, Tessa had established both her authority and her approachability, setting clear expectations while responding to the children's questions with patience and genuine interest. When the school day ended, she felt a deep satisfaction that she hadn't experienced in years. This was what she had been meant to do, what her mother had prepared her for. As the children filed out, Jenny Holloway appeared at the door with a basket. "I thought you might be too busy to prepare a proper dinner on your first day," she explained, setting the basket on Tessa's desk. "It's just some bread, cheese, and cold chicken, but it should save you cooking tonight." "That's so kind," Tessa said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Jenny." "How did it go?" Jenny asked, looking around the classroom where evidence of the day's lesson still covered the blackboard. "Better than I expected," Tessa admitted. "They're good children mostly, a few troublemakers, but nothing I can't handle." Jenny smiled knowingly. "Let me guess, Billy Peterson was one of them." "How did you know?" "His father is the man Adam punched at the hotel," Jenny explained. "The story's all over town. Most people think Peterson deserved worse, but his son might take it out on you." Tessa sighed. "He did spend most of the day testing boundaries, but I think we reached an understanding by the end." "Good for you," Jenny said approvingly. "Listen, Thomas and I are having a small dinner party on Saturday. Nothing fancy, just a few friends. We'd love for you to join us, Adam too, of course. It might help smooth your entry into Silver Creek society, so to speak." The invitation was clearly motivated by kindness, and Tessa accepted gratefully. As Jenny left, promising to send details, Tessa reflected on how differently her life was unfolding than she had feared when her father lost that fateful poker game. Instead of being forced into servitude to a cruel man, she was building a life of purpose, making friends, and most unexpectedly falling in love. The week passed in a blur of lessons, grading, and evening visits from Adam, who faithfully appeared at her door each evening with flowers, books, or simply conversation. On Friday, he brought news that cast a shadow over their growing happiness. "Simmons is back in town," he said without preamble when she opened the door. "He's staying at the hotel and meeting with his foreman from the Diamond Bar." Tessa felt a chill run through her. "Do you think he's still looking for revenge?" Adam finished. "I don't know. Judge Holloway says he's filing papers to sell his holdings here, the mine, the Diamond Bar, his share in the hotel. It could be he's genuinely leaving. Or it could be a cover for something else," Tessa said, voicing the concern she could see in Adam's eyes. He nodded grimly. "I've asked some of the hands to keep watch on the ranch, and I've spoken to Sheriff Davis about increasing patrols near the school." He took her hands in his. "I don't want to frighten you, but I need you to be vigilant." "I will be," she promised, squeezing his hands. "Do you think we should still go to the Holloway's dinner tomorrow?" Adam considered this. "Yes," he decided. "If we change our plans, it shows fear. And Thomas is the town lawyer, his home will be safe enough." The Holloways lived in one of Silver Creek's few two-story houses, a handsome structure with a wide porch and carefully tended garden. When Adam and Tessa arrived on Saturday evening, they found the house already filled with the cheerful sounds of conversation and laughter. Jenny welcomed them warmly, leading them into a parlor where 4 other guests were already enjoying pre-dinner drinks. Tessa recognized Judge Holloway and his wife, along with Dr. Martin from the school board, and a woman Adam introduced as Barbara Wilson, owner of the general store. "Miss Pierce has already made quite an impression on the children," Judge Holloway said after introductions were complete. "My grandson James came home yesterday insisting that learning about ancient Egypt was actually interesting, which I believe is high praise from a 10-year-old boy." Tessa smiled, pleased by the compliment. The children are eager to learn when the material captures their imagination. James has a particular interest in archaeology, I've noticed. The conversation flowed easily through dinner, with topics ranging from local politics to literature to humorous stories about Silver Creek's early days. Tessa found herself relaxing, enjoying the company of these people who seemed to accept her without judgment. After dinner, the men withdrew to Thomas Holloway's study for cigars, while the women remained in the parlor. Once they were alone, Mrs. Holloway, the judge's wife, not Jenny, leaned forward with a conspiratorial air. "Now, Miss Pierce, you must tell us how you've managed to capture Adam McAllister's heart so thoroughly. The man hasn't looked at a woman seriously since he returned from tracking down those bandits 3 years ago." Tessa felt herself blushing. "I'm not sure I've captured anything, Mrs. Holloway. We're merely getting to know one another." Jenny came to her rescue. "Mother, don't embarrass her. It's obvious they care for each other deeply, and that's all any of us need to know." Barbara Wilson, the store owner, nodded in agreement. "Adam deserves happiness after everything he's been through. And so do you, Miss Pierce, from what I understand of your circumstances." The genuine warmth in the women's voices touched Tessa deeply. These were not the judgmental gossips she had feared, but kind-hearted people willing to welcome her into their community. When the men rejoined them, Adam immediately moved to sit beside Tessa on the small sofa, his shoulder brushing against hers in a way that felt both protective and affectionate. The evening concluded with music. Jenny played the piano while her husband sang in a surprisingly fine tenor and more conversation. As they walked home under a canopy of stars, Adam took Tessa's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "You seem to enjoy yourself tonight," he observed. "I did," she admitted. "They're good people. I wasn't sure how they would receive me given the unusual circumstances of my arrival in Silver Creek." Adam stopped walking, turning to face her. "Tessa, you must know by now that anyone who spends more than 5 minutes in your company can see what an exceptional woman you are. How you came to Silver Creek matters far less than who you are." She looked up at him, this man who had risked so much to give her a chance at freedom, who continued to stand beside her as she built a new life. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Adam McAllister," she said softly. "Not because you rescued me, but because of who you are, your kindness, your strength, your unwavering sense of justice." In the silver moonlight, she could see his eyes darken with emotion. "I don't think I'm falling in love with you, Tessa Pierce," he replied, his voice husky. "I know I am." He bent to kiss her, and this time there was no hesitation, no restraint. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as her hands came up to frame his face. The kiss deepened, expressing feelings too complex for words: gratitude and desire, tenderness and passion, the promise of a future neither had dared hope for. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "Not now, not until you're ready, but someday. Say you'll be my wife." Tessa's heart soared at the words she had scarcely allowed herself to dream of hearing. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, Adam, I'll marry you when the time is right." He kissed her again, sealing their promise under the vast Montana sky. And for that perfect moment, the shadows of the past and the uncertainties of the future faded away, leaving only the two of them and the love that had blossomed from the most unlikely beginning. The next morning, Tessa woke to the sound of knocking at her door. Wrapping a shawl around her nightgown, she opened it to find Sheriff Davis standing on her doorstep, his expression grave. "Miss Pierce," he said, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. "I'm sorry to disturb you so early, but there's been a development regarding Edgar Simmons that you and McAllister should know about." "What is it?" she asked, her heart racing. "Is Adam all right?" "Adam's fine, far as I know," the sheriff assured her. "But Simmons was found dead in his hotel room this morning, shot through the heart at close range." Tessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "My God, who?" "That's why I'm here," Sheriff Davis said grimly. The hotel clerk heard an argument late last night, a man's voice accusing Simmons of cheating him, and Adam was seen entering the hotel around that time. "That's impossible," Tessa said immediately. "Adam was with me. We were at the Holloways for dinner, and then he walked me home." "He didn't leave until after midnight." Relief crossed the sheriff's face. "That's good to hear. I didn't think Adam was the type to shoot a man in cold blood, no matter what grievance he might have, but I had to ask." "Of course," Tessa said, still trying to process the news. "Do you have any other suspects?" "Several," the sheriff admitted. "Simmons wasn't exactly beloved in Silver Creek. Could have been one of his miners who felt cheated on wages, or a gambling partner who caught him dealing from the bottom of the deck. We'll investigate thoroughly." After the sheriff left, Tessa dressed quickly, intending to ride out to the ranch to tell Adam the news. But before she could leave, she heard the now familiar sound of his horse approaching. She met him at the door, relieved to see him safe but worried about how he would take the news of Simmons's death. To her surprise, he already knew. "Sheriff Davis stopped by the ranch on his way into town," Adam explained as he dismounted. "Samuel told him I was with you last night, but I wanted to make sure you were all right. News like this can be unsettling." "I'm fine," Tessa assured him, leading him inside. "But I'm worried about what this means. Will there be an investigation? Could you be in danger from whoever did kill Simmons?" Adam shook his head. "Davis has a good idea who was responsible. Peterson, the man I struck at the hotel, was seen leaving town in a hurry this morning, his saddlebags full. Apparently Simmons owed him money for some special work that the sheriff suspects wasn't entirely legal." "So it's over?" Tessa asked, hardly daring to believe it could be so simple. "The threat is gone." "It seems that way," Adam said cautiously. "At least the immediate threat from Simmons. But Silver Creek has its share of troubles, as any frontier town does." Tessa nodded, understanding his meaning. Life in the West was never entirely safe or predictable. But for the first time since her arrival in Silver Creek, she felt the weight of specific danger lifting from her shoulders. As spring turned to summer, Tessa threw herself into her teaching with renewed enthusiasm. The children responded to her methods with growing interest and improving behavior, even Billy Peterson, who had been quieter and more withdrawn since his father's disappearance, but was slowly coming out of his shell under Tessa's patient guidance. Her relationship with Adam deepened as well. He courted her properly, as he had promised, taking her on picnics by the creek, escorting her to church socials, and bringing her small, thoughtful gifts that showed how well he was coming to know her. A book of poetry she had mentioned once in passing. A silver hairpin shaped like a feather, reminiscent of the quill pen she used for grading. A young apple tree for the small garden behind the teacher's quarters. because you mentioned missing the one that grew outside your childhood home." By late summer, their engagement was official, announced in church one Sunday morning to smiles and a few knowing looks from those who had watched their courtship unfold. They set the wedding date for October, when the aspens would be gold against the Montana sky and the school term would be well established. "Are you sure you don't want to wait until the school year is complete?" Adam asked as they discussed plans one evening at the ranch. "The school board might prefer." "The school board has already given their blessing," Tessa interrupted with a smile. "And there's precedent for married teachers in Silver Creek. Miss Winters's predecessor was a Mrs. Someone or other, according to Judge Holloway." "And you're certain you want to live here at the ranch?" Adam pressed, gesturing around at the study where they sat. "I know how much you value your independence. We could build a new house in town if you prefer." Tessa rose from her chair and moved to sit beside him on the leather sofa, taking his hand in hers. "Adam, I love this house. I love waking up to the sound of the creek and the sight of the mountains. And yes, I value my independence, but I value sharing my life with you more." She squeezed his fingers gently. "Besides, Maria has already started planning where our children will sleep someday. I couldn't possibly disappoint her." The mention of children brought a soft light to Adam's eyes. "Our children," he repeated, as if testing the sound of the words. "I like that." "So do I," Tessa admitted, leaning against his shoulder. "Though perhaps not right away. I'd like some time just for us first." Adam pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We have all the time in the world, my love." The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, with just enough autumn chill in the air to bring a blush to Tessa's cheeks as she prepared in Jenny Holloway's guest room. Jenny had insisted on hosting the bride's preparations, and now she stood back, admiring the results of their combined efforts. "You look beautiful," she said sincerely as Tessa surveyed herself in the mirror. The wedding dress was simple but elegant cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, sewn by Maria with help from several of the women in town who had taken Tessa under their wing. Her hair was arranged in a soft updo with small white flowers woven through the golden strands, and around her neck hung a single pearl on a gold chain, a gift from Adam that morning, delivered with a note saying it had belonged to his mother. "I never thought I would have this," Tessa said softly, touching the pearl. "A year ago, I was just trying to hold my father's home together, watching him gamble away our future. And now you're marrying one of the finest men in Montana territory," Jenny finished for her, adjusting a fold in the dress's skirt. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" At the church, it seemed the entire town had turned out for the occasion. The small building was filled to capacity, with latecomers standing in the back and children perched on their father's shoulders for a better view. As the music began, a violinist from Helena, whom Adam had hired as a surprise, Tessa took a deep breath and began her walk down the aisle. Adam waited at the altar, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him in a new black suit, his hair neatly trimmed and his face clean-shaven for the occasion. But it was the expression in his eyes as he watched her approach that took her breath away, a look of such profound love and wonder that she felt tears pricking at her own eyes. Judge Holloway, who had been authorized to perform the ceremony in the absence of a permanent minister, spoke eloquently about love, commitment, and building a life together. When the time came for vows, Adam took Tessa's hands in his voice steady and sure as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life. When it was her turn, Tessa looked up into the face of the man who had given her the most precious gift, the freedom to choose her own path, and found her own voice equally steady. "I, Tessa Pierce, take you, Adam McAllister, to be my lawfully wedded husband." I promise to stand by your side in joy and in sorrow, in plenty and in want, in peace and in turmoil, for as long as we both shall live. I choose you, freely and completely, today and every day hereafter." The simple gold bands they exchanged seemed to glow in the autumn sunlight streaming through the church windows as Judge Holloway pronounced them husband and wife. Adam's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, and when they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. McAllister, the cheers and applause nearly raised the church's roof. The celebration continued at the ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard and lanterns hung from tree branches in preparation for the evening's dancing. Food and drink flowed freely. Children darted between the adults' legs in impromptu games, and even Samuel unbent enough to lead Maria in a lively reel when the music started. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festivities, Adam drew Tessa away from the crowds to a quiet spot beneath the old oak tree where they had first discussed their feelings months before. "Happy, Mrs. McAllister?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Deliriously so, Mr. McAllister," she replied, tipping her face up for his kiss. "Though I still can't quite believe it's real." "Oh, it's real," he assured her, pulling her closer, "and it's just the beginning." 5 years later, Tessa McAllister stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching as Adam chased their 3-year-old son, James, around the yard. The boy's delighted squeals carried on the summer breeze, mingling with the gentler sounds of Tessa's daughter, 1-year-old Emma, babbling in her mother's arms. So much had changed since that fateful day when Thomas Pierce lost a poker game and tried to trade his daughter to settle the debt. Silver Creek had grown into a proper town, with a railroad connection and a newly built brick schoolhouse where Tessa still taught the older children 3 days a week, while a younger teacher handled the primary grades. Adam had expanded the ranch's operations, focusing more on horse breeding than cattle, and building a reputation for producing some of the finest mounts in the territory. The original house had been expanded as well, with new rooms added for the children and a proper library where Tessa and Adam still spent many evenings discussing books and ideas. "Papa, catch me," James called, darting behind a tree as Adam pretended to search for him. "Where did that boy go?" Adam wondered aloud, looking dramatically in the wrong direction. "I can't seem to find him anywhere," James giggled, giving away his position, and Adam swooped in, lifting the child high into the air as he shrieked with laughter. Watching them, Tessa felt her heart swell with a love so profound it sometimes took her breath away. "Your papa is silly," she whispered to Emma, who gurgled in apparent agreement, her tiny fingers grasping at the pearl necklace Tessa still wore daily. Adam carried James toward the porch, the boy now perched on his shoulders. "This young man says he's hungry enough to eat a whole pie by himself," he reported with mock seriousness. "I told him that's impossible, but he insists we test the theory. Does he now?" Tessa said, raising an eyebrow at her son. "And what about sharing with his sister and parents?" James considered this, his expression so like his father's when contemplating a serious matter that Tessa had to suppress a smile. "I guess I could share," he decided magnanimously. "But I get the biggest piece." "A fair compromise," Adam agreed, lifting him down from his shoulders. "Go wash your hands and we'll see about that pie." As James raced into the house, Adam climbed the porch steps to join Tessa and Emma, placing a gentle kiss on his daughter's head before leaning in to kiss his wife. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that still made Tessa's heart skip a beat. "You might have mentioned it," she teased, "but I never tire of hearing it." "Then I'll say it again," he murmured, drawing her and Emma into his embrace. I love you, Tessa McAllister. More than I ever thought possible. Over his shoulder, Tessa could see the valley stretching out before them, the ranch that was their home, the town in the distance where she had found her calling. The mountains beyond that seemed to guard this life they had built together. It was a far cry from the future she had feared when her father gambled away everything, including her. Instead of becoming property, she had found freedom. Instead of servitude, she had found purpose. And instead of fear, she had found a love that continued to grow deeper and richer with each passing day. I love you too, she said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him again. Always and forever. And as the sun set over the Montana wilderness, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Tessa knew with absolute certainty that the greatest gamble of all had been Adam's the day he'd paid triple a gambling debt not to own her, but to give her choice. It was a wager that had paid off beyond either of their wildest dreams.